Neo-Nihilism, The Philosophy of Power by Peter Sjostedth. Notes: Nihilism in the sense used here means that there exists no objective morals, no objective good or evil. Morality is an illusion. It is presented as a fact, but is merely a power structure. There is no prescriptive morality. It can be a hindrance in many cases. This fact is liberating. Since there is no morality, there is no basis for law. It is simply one set of people ruling over other by force. If law is based on morality and morality on power, then power is bedrock of human affairs. For Schopenhauer, the constant striving of desire causes only suffering, need, disappointment and boredom. For Nietzsche, this drive may cause pain, but it is not inimical to life. Pain is a catalyst to life. To claim that seeking power is immoral is to seek power. When we accept that life is will to power, our consciousness will align itself with our subconscious, providing a tonic harmony. Morality is illusion. Conflation of descriptive and prescriptive morality causes confusion. We can describe those moralities in terms of behavior, belief, biological and cultural origination. Example: dying in battle was a virtue for ancient Vikings. Logic falters when moral imperatives, oughts, shoulds, duties are derived from moral descriptions or facts. Because one acts in a certain way due to certain disposition does not logically imply that others ought to act that way. Someone might be aggressive does not imply that one ought to be aggressive. David Hume said one cannot derive an ought from is, a value from fact, a prescription from description. This is the is-ought gap known as the Hume's guillotine. As a means logically implies an end, so an ought can only come from if clause. Example: I ought to exercise if I want to build strength. If clause is purpose of an act, but as existentialists realized, without God there is no objective purpose for a human. Without God there is no purpose for man, no absolute meaning to life. With no purpose there is no objective, universal if clause, and no ought clause, no absolute morality. All oughts are conditioned by if. Even if virtually every person had the same amicable nature, one still could not derive a value from the supposed fact. An ought from an is, a prescription from a description, due to Hume's guillotine. A person, a lone wolf, acting contrary to generally desired will for amicability, could not be said to be wrong, only unusual. Even if it were true, no prescriptive morality can be derived, because if everyone shared the same values, no prescriptive morality would be required. One would not need to tell people how to behave if they already did so. Prescriptive morality is only necessary when other people act contrary to the way that one would desire them to behave. All prescriptive or normative morality is the sought imposition of one person or group's desire over another. Morality is a power structure. Glory in battle, valor were frequently preferred as purpose than the perceived decadence of peace and harmony. It is not contrary to reason to prefer to have a subjective desire for violence rather than peace, chaos to order. It is psychological rather than logical matters. Hume said, it is not contrary to reason to prefer destruction of whole world to scratching of my finger. An ought can only come from an if. An ought can never come from an is. A good action is the one that attains its purpose well. A good person is one who attains his purpose well. But as mankind has no purpose, there is nothing like a good person. This term only refers to a person whose belief and actions conform to another person's desired purpose for mankind. As people's desire differ, the same individual will be considered good by one person and bad by another. This does not and cannot lead to cultural relativism, a view that all cultures are same, valid, and no criticism of them ought to occur. As there are no objective oughts, to claim one ought not criticize another culture cannot be objectively true. Although another culture's values may not be objectively incorrect, they can transgress one's own desires and so can be dispersed as undesirable rather than incorrect to serve oneself. Utilitarianism. What is good is that which yields greatest happiness for the greatest number. God's fall brings down the absolute sanction of this egalitarian rule. The rule, do unto others what you want them to do to you, is very helpful to those who are in an inferior position as it's a command. Its command would increase their standing, their power. But for someone in superior position, this rule would decrease their relative standing. For such a reason does Nietzsche call Christianity a slave morality. He saw Christianity as power structure emanating from the weak, as a system that conforms to their type's subjective desire. Happiness as an end has not always been considered good, but quite the opposite, a sign of decadence and decay. Logically, good means attainment of a purpose. So happiness is good if it attains a purpose. Happiness can involve unhappiness of others, as expressed by German word Schadenfreude, in which case claiming happiness to be good, something to be attained, would contradict the first presupposition that one ought to treat others as equal. Contractarianism is another false idol worshipped by the masses that is easily refuted. This moral theory claims that values derived from actions that instill peace and stability, such as altruism, charity, law abidance, as it is in everyone's interest. It assumes that peace and stability are objective values, values that all would desire, in order to conclude that values which induce peace and stability, such as being non-violent, a good citizen, are correct. A person may prefer life of adventure, war, risk to life of comfort and conformism. John Rawls' Wheel of Ignorance. He stated that an issue can be decided if it is moral or not if one had to create society without knowing one's role in it, wearing Wheel of Ignorance. Naturally, he claimed, one would forbid all forms of inequality as one would suffer it oneself. But his will also forbids him from logic. If one wants an egalitarian society, one would wear the Wheel of Ignorance, and the one who did not want will not wear it. And one could consider not wearing it as immoral, as it is founded on choosing to wear it. Ayn Rand's objectivism, virtue of selfishness. She believed that the is-ought gap could be bridged by arguing that will to survival is a fact, and is from which an ought can be derived. And since we all share this will to life, we ought to ensure our survival. The is clause becomes if clause. The I want to survive, I ought to do XYZ. But what about people who commit suicide? A condition for a set is not by necessity a member of that set. Example, a condition for thunder is lightning, but lightning is not thunder. A condition for value is life. A condition for values is life, but this does not entail that life is a value. If it is accepted that a condition for a set is necessarily a member of the set, then as life is a condition for disvalue, life is also disvalue. This emerges a contradiction that life is both value and disvalue. Hume's guillotine, objective value cannot be derived from objective fact. As per Rand, one ought to value life as life is. It exists. Merely means that subjective value, one's values, comes from objective fact that one exists. explained in Marathi. Objective value from objective fact is impossible. Rand creates a moral philosophy while calling it objectivism. Without God, there is no prescriptive morality. Those who argue that morality comes from evolution, that we have evolved sympathy and altruism, and hence we ought to be sympathetic and altruistic, fall into the is-ought gap. Just because we evolved this way does not mean we ought to be that way. Characteristics are descriptions, and they cannot magically be transformed into prescriptions. We have evolved envy as well, aggression, violence as well. If morality is illusion, why do great multitude believe it? Same as religion. It is propagated by priestly class for their maintenance and power. It is followed by the masses since it offers consolation and an explanation of unknown. To prescribe is to judge, to put oneself in a higher position of authority, power. Even if morals seem prima facie to be altruistic, their prescriber puts himself in a position where he can dictate what is to be done. If enough heads agree with the ideology, prescriber gains further power. If one has caring, compassionate character, one will be motivated to believe in a creed that objectifies it as true for all. Normative morality is a tool for power. We must distinguish descriptive and prescriptive morality, ethics. All morality express prescriptions, not facts, desires of one person to change behavior of another. We are not above the brutes because we know morality. We are above them because we use violence. That is morality. Law is force. We are subject to law that we did not consent. If one wants to live in an ordered society, a subjective if clause itself, then one ought to advocate infrastructural laws, such as road laws, property rights, etc. One may do this if it is in one's interest. However, it may also be in one's interest to break these laws. It will often be retorted that if you want people to obey the law, then you also ought to obey it, lest you be a hypocrite. However, this is an error. The error lies in the fact that if clause does not logically imply the ought clause, and does not imply given means. The hidden premise which would justify the conclusion that I ought to obey the law would be people ought to have equal power. But this hidden premise is not objectively true, since not everybody share the same desire. A powerful group imposes its laws on others. Only the state is allowed to exercise violence. A state is a power structure which promotes law inside and war outside. It is a large gang. Dignity is pride in one's powers. Max Stirner. The state calls its violence as law, and that of individual as crime. Morals do not progress, they change. Law reflects power, not truth or justice. Law is will to power. Life is will to power. As morality and immorality are fictions, the will to power is set free from condemnation, and also thereby in request of a new explanation. Everything that lives instinctually seeks power. Survival is lowest degree of drive to power. Survival is merely the lowest degree of that drive to power. One cannot gain power if one is not alive to do so. All morality, all law, all ideology are merely expression of this primal drive. In fact, Nietzsche began as disciple of Schopenhauer. Kant, in The Critique of Pure Reason, stated that world we perceive is our own creation. Before him, John Locke and others had successfully reasoned that colors, sounds, smells, and all other qualia exist only ideally as idea. Reality in this sense is created by the mind. The former change according to mind type, the latter remain the same. Space and time do not exist out there, but merely ways in which we translate reality according to our mind's inherent structure. Other types perceive in other spatio-temporal order. Kant calls the world we perceive as phenomena. The world that exists independent of any mind is noumena, universe in itself, not in us. Thus, Schopenhauer writes, before Kant, we were in time. Now, time is in us. Schopenhauer said there is one thing in itself that we can know, and that is will. Our inner self, beyond self conceptions, based on language, is the force that is individual. Even our bodies are representations according to the forms of spatio-temporal representations. It is important that our bodies do not contain the force, rather the body is the force, represented according to structure of our mind. That which represents the world according to its forms cannot itself exist solely as a representation. What represents representation is will, according to Schopenhauer. Even animals have their wills. However, as space and time are forms of our representation, and as separation is only possible in terms of spatial and temporal division, Schopenhauer understands that all reality is one. Thus, every force always results in wanting, boredom, or disappointment. He is hence known as pessimist. His ethical theory is descriptive and not prescriptive. For Nietzsche, the striving of the will was not to be devalued as it would lead to suffering. Logically, the if clause of desiring the abolition of suffering is not objective. Someone might desire suffering to strengthen himself. Happiness is merely side effect of overcoming an obstacle, that is, gaining power. Everything wills power, though most often unconsciously. A plant strives for roots and sun space. Seeking truth is seeking power. It is not a drive in itself. The more information one has over his surroundings, the more power it has to survive predators. Life does not contain will to power. It is will to power. Remember, the end is power, not truth. An ideology that empowers the weak for being weak. Nietzsche calls it slave morality. Master morality has characters such as strength, honor, pride, courage, fortitude. Being able to rely on one's own judgment of what is valuable to oneself is not possible for a greater population of the earth. It is of value of oneself may not be to others, as objective morality is illusion, Neo-Nihilism. If you stand apart, deflecting external imperatives, refusing submission to any god, state, creed, law, never surrendering your will to will of others, if such a stance you take, apotheosis to a heavenly body will you manifest. The free man is a warrior. Neo